My name is Marion Taylor. I'm 22 years old. And this is the story of how my dad drained the trust fund meant to build my future, then had the audacity to demand I send $5,500 for my sister. He thought I'd stay quiet. Instead, I took back $27,000 and the family cabin, and left behind the daughter he could never control again. It was a Wednesday morning when everything snapped. I was standing barefoot in the kitchen, halfway through pouring coffee, when the first text came in. Dad. Sold your tablet. Scarlett needed a new iPhone. Be grateful we let you stay here rent-free. The mug slipped from my hand and clattered against the counter. I didn't even flinch. That tablet wasn't a toy. It held my portfolio. Designs I'd worked on since sophomore year. My UI/UX mockups. My financial aid applications. Letters of recommendation. Everything. Blinked stunned. Reread the message. And then another one landed seconds later like a bomb. Dad. Also, transfer $5,500 by Friday for her new tuition. Not a request. That was the moment the coffee turned bitter in my mouth. I stood there in the kitchen of the house I had grown up in. Burnt orange walls, crooked tile, and a ceiling fan that groaned in circles overhead. And I realized, I wasn't a daughter to my father. I was an account, resource, convenient, compliant donor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I walked to the table, opened my laptop, and saw it too was gone. That was when something broke inside me. Not like glass, but like a bone that had been out of place too long and finally shifted into the right position. Because here's what you need to understand before you judge me. I didn't grow up poor. But I grew up invisible. My father, Ronald Taylor, was a respected civil engineer in Monroe County, Georgia. People called him Ronnie. He coached softball in the spring. Knew everyone at church. The type of man who'd pull over to help fix a stranger's tire, but would ignore his own daughter's graduation speech. My mom, Darlene, was a school office secretary. Quiet. Timid. She wore beige everything and never contradicted my dad in public. I used to think she was just tired. But later I'd learn, silence can be a choice too. Then there was Scarlett, my younger sister by 18 months, but you'd think she was the family crown jewel. Smart mouth, bleached curls, and an endless list of second, third, and fourth chances. At 14, she broke a neighbor's window with a baseball bat and blamed it on bad vibes. Dad paid for it without blinking. At 16, she totaled a Nissan Sentra my grandfather left us in his will. She was under stress, Mom said. At 19, she failed out of her third community college, and they threw her a self-discovery party. Meanwhile, I got a cake from the gas station when I turned 20. A literal gas station cake. With my name spelled Marion. When I got a full ride to Georgia Tech, Dad called it a free pass, and warned me not to get too big for my britches. But I didn't complain. I worked 2 jobs, tutoring and cleaning part-time, to afford food and save every dime. You know why? Because when I was 12, my grandfather told me he'd set up a trust in my name. He said, "It's not much now, but it's for your future. For when you want to start your business. Or your life." I believed him. Held on to that dream like a lighthouse in a storm. But now that dream was gone. Sold. Drained. Repurposed for Scarlett's latest life phase. And when I pushed back, "Dad, you're selfish. She needs it more than you." I left the house that day. No plan. No packed bag. Just rage and keys and a voicemail from my father telling me I had 48 hours to be useful or leave. I drove straight to the only person who'd ever seen me without the filters. My best friend, Nyla. Nyla opened her apartment door wearing fuzzy socks and a messy bun. Her face dropped the second she saw me. "Marion." I handed her the phone. She read the messages. Her jaw clenched. "He really said that," she whispered. He nodded. "And sold my tablet." She didn't ask me to explain. Didn't question if I was overreacting. She just pulled me into her living room, threw a blanket over my shoulders, and brought me a notebook. "Make a list," she said. "Everything they owe you." And I did. Not out of revenge, but clarity. $1,200. Groceries I covered over 2 years. $750. Clothes and shoes borrowed by Scarlett. $3,000. Tuition deposit I'd paid up front because Dad forgot the deadline. $8,347. Unauthorized withdrawals I tracked from my joint account with Dad since age 18. And then, the trust fund. It was supposed to be separate. Legal lockbox. I'd never touched it because I thought it was sacred. Turns out, sacred doesn't mean safe. Not when your father has access and no conscience. By midnight, Nyla had emailed a contact from her internship, someone in financial fraud services. Meanwhile, I found the original trust document in my email, scanned years ago by Grandpa before he died. At 2:47 a.m. we were printing copies, organizing tabs, marking dates. It wasn't a plan for revenge. It was preparation for truth. Because the next day, I would walk back into that house, not to beg or explain, but to collect what was mine. Not just money, not just dignity, my voice. And I wasn't leaving without it. By the time the sun came up, I was already parked outside my parents' house. Not in the driveway like I used to, not anymore. I parked down the street, hidden behind a neighbor's oak tree like a stranger. Because that's what I'd become in my own home. The neighborhood was quiet. Few dogs barked in the distance. The air smelled like pine and old grass clippings. I waited for the lights to flicker off inside, signaling that Dad had left for work. He was always out by 6:15 a.m., no exceptions. His routines were military tight. He liked it that way. Predictable. Controllable. That's why what I was about to do would shake him more than any argument ever could. At 6:21 the front porch light blinked off. By 6:27 I was slipping in through the side door, using the same rusted key hidden in the flower pot that had been there since I was 13. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a retrieval mission. Inside everything looked the same. The beige couch stained with coffee rings, the faded rug that Mom swore was antique, the crooked family photo above the fireplace where I stood off to the side, as if I didn't quite belong. I headed straight to my old room. It smelled faintly of lavender, the scent I used to spray on my sheets so I could sleep during finals week. My books were still on the shelf, untouched. But my desk empty. No laptop. No sketchbooks. No hard drive. In the closet, my navy trench coat was missing too. The one I'd saved up for during my junior year internship. I found it later, on the coat rack in Scarlett's room. Course. I didn't bother confronting her. Not yet. Instead, I reached beneath my bed and pulled up the loose floorboard that no one else knew about. There, tucked in an old shoebox, were printed bank statements, a USB with backup files, and my grandmother's silver bracelet, one of the few things I had left from her before she passed. I slid everything into my backpack, then took a deep breath. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 began at 7:30 a.m. sharp. At Monroe County Records office. I walked in wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, looking like a tired college kid. But inside I felt like I was stepping into battle. I met with Mrs. Delgado, a kind woman who'd been there since I was a child. Her daughter used to play volleyball with me in middle school. "How's your family, Marion?" she asked as she typed. Pause. "Still learning the meaning of the word," I replied. She smiled awkwardly, clearly unsure what to say. I handed her a request form. "I need all records regarding the Oakview Hill cabin, originally deeded to Ronald Taylor, transferred from George Taylor. That's your grandfather's old property." He nodded. "Funny. We just had an inquiry about that last month. Someone tried to get a property valuation." My stomach twisted. Was the name Scarlett Taylor on that request? Mrs. Delgado scanned the screen. "No," she said slowly. "It was your father." Course it was. The cabin was supposed to be mine. Grandpa had told me that himself. It was where I learned to fish, to build fires, to be quiet with myself. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, no central air, but it was freedom. He'd said it was the one thing in this world I could always count on. Now Dad was trying to sell it. Quietly. Behind my back. Clenched my jaw. How do I find out if I'm listed as the legal heir? Yes. Mrs. Delgado clicked through several pages, printed 2 forms, and handed me a pen. Request the deed. If your name's anywhere on that property, even secondary, you can file an injunction to block any future sale until it's sorted. She gave me the copy. Good luck, sweetheart. By 10 a.m., I was back at Nyla's apartment, spreading papers across her dining table. Bank records. Withdrawal notices. The property deed request. Photos of receipts for tuition, clothing, utilities. Everything I'd covered over the last 4 years that was supposed to come out of my trust. You're building a case, Nyla murmured, scanning the documents. Not just against him. Against the narrative. I looked up. What do you mean? She pushed her glasses up, staring at me like I was finally catching up to something she'd known for years. Your dad taught you that love had to be earned. That being useful was the only way to matter. That Scarlett was fragile and you were unbreakable. He made you believe being quiet was noble. That's the story he's been writing about you your whole life. But you're writing a new one now. That night I wrote a letter. Not to my parents. Not even to Scarlett. To myself. It read, "You are not difficult for saying no. You are not cold for refusing to be used. You are not less loving because you protect your boundaries. You are not a bad daughter for walking away from a house that never saw you clearly." I folded it, slid it into my wallet, and carried it with me the next morning when I returned to the house. Not to speak. Not to argue. Just to leave something behind. I laid the envelope on the kitchen table, right where Dad usually drank his morning coffee. Inside were printed bank statements, a notarized letter from my grandfather's estate lawyer confirming my name on the Oakview cabin, and a breakdown of every dollar that had been misused from my trust. On the final page, written in black ink, were 2 words. No more. I walked out before anyone could see me. The next day, all hell broke loose. The morning after I left that envelope on the kitchen table, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls. 4 voicemails. And then a flurry of texts, most of them from numbers saved under names I wished I'd deleted years ago. Dad. What the hell is this? Mom. Can we talk before you do something irreversible? Scarlett. Why would you do this? Mom's been crying all morning. But the one that struck the deepest nerve came at 8:14 a.m., from an unknown number. Penelope. No greeting, no emojis. Just that one name I hadn't heard spoken by someone with love in years. But it wasn't love behind it this time. It was panic. Because I had exposed the truth. And truth is only scary to people who have something to hide. Then came the voicemail from my dad. I didn't play it, just read the transcript on screen. You've gone too far. This isn't how family handles things. I'm disappointed in you. Call me so we can fix this quietly. There's no need to get lawyers involved. There it was. Not I'm sorry. Not I didn't realize what I'd done. But I'm disappointed in you. Like I was the one who had been stealing from him for years. I didn't answer a single call. Instead, I met with my grandmother. Her name is Margaret Taylor. She's the one person in my family who had always seemed to exist in the background, like a shadowy monarch, never meddling, never speaking up. Till now. We met at her sister Helen's house. A neutral location. She wore her favorite gray cardigan, the one she always pulled tight when she was nervous. But her eyes were as sharp as I'd ever seen. Sit, she said, motioning to the long wooden table. Next to her was Mr. Rollins, our family lawyer for as long as I could remember. He looked uneasy. Professional, but uneasy. I want to hear it all, Grandma said. So I told her. I laid it out. Precise. Every dollar. Every lie. Every time my father had used his authority to withdraw from my trust under the guise of helping the family, while Scarlett got new phones, tuition checks, and even a weekend in Miami to recover from academic stress. Grandma listened silently, only nodding at key points. When I showed her the printed copies of unauthorized transfers and the notarized confirmation of my name on the Oakview Hill Cabins deed, She didn't even blink. Mr. Rollins, however, exhaled sharply. "Well, Marion," he said after flipping through the folder again. "Every number checks out. And transferring funds from your trust without your signed consent, even as a parent or guardian, is a violation of its terms." He paused. "And from a legal standpoint, Scarlett's account, your sister's, is still intact. Your father stopped touching it about a year ago. I suspect he anticipated this day might come." Grandma finally spoke. Her voice was cool but thunderous in its calm. "I want to file a petition to remove Ronald's control over any remaining family assets. Effective immediately." Mr. Rollins nodded. "We'll start that process. We'll also seek reimbursement for what was taken." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my fingers clutching the strap of my bag like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Grandma reached across the table and gently placed her hand over mine. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," she said. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of the solution now." And I knew in that moment, maybe for the first time, I wasn't alone. But the story doesn't end with legal filings and court documents. Gets messier first. Scarlett showed up at Nyla's place 2 days later. I opened the door expecting another demand, another hissed accusation. But Scarlett stood there barefaced, disheveled and shaking. She clutched her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I didn't know," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't speak. Just stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the edge of the couch like it might swallow her whole. "They told me you refused to use your fund. That you didn't want help. That you thought you were better than us. That your tuition was all covered and you didn't need anything else." I crossed my arms, still silent. Scarlett looked up, eyes red. "I believed them," I finally answered. "You wanted to believe them." She flinched. And maybe that was too harsh, but it was also true. I pulled up the folders on my drive, showed her the side-by-side breakdown of both our trust accounts. Mine drained by 19. Hers only recently touched. I showed her the bank log with my name as the original beneficiary. The log showing how Dad had used my routing number to make payments labeled Scarlett's art fees and Scarlett's laptop reimbursement. She stared at the screen for a long time, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled through something, handed it to me. Emails, messages, between my dad and Mom, discussing how to balance the optics of the accounts. One line made my stomach turn. "Don't let them compare numbers. If Marion finds out how much is in Scarlett's, it'll all blow up." Scarlett's hand covered her mouth. "I didn't know they were doing this," she whispered. "To you. I thought you were just cold, closed off. Mom said you were always trying to compete." I looked her in the eye. "No, Scarlett. I was trying to survive." She cried then. For real. Not dramatic mascara-smudged tears, but quiet, broken ones. The kind that don't come from guilt, but from a crack finally breaking open. "I'm sorry," she said. "I believed the story they gave me." I didn't hug her. But I didn't ask her to leave either. Instead, I handed her the file and said, "Then help me fix it." Scarlett stayed longer than I expected that day. Maybe longer than either of us were comfortable with. But for once, she didn't fill the silence with jokes or deflection. She sat still. Absorb. Shame. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Not just the pitch, but the texture. "I always thought you were ungrateful," she whispered, staring at her chipped fingernails. "I didn't know ungratefulness was just refusing to be used." I said nothing. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust what might come out of my mouth. After years of being called selfish, dramatic, cold, I was still learning how to speak without apology. Scarlett pulled a stack of printouts from her purse. "I want to help. I found these in Mom's Dropbox folder on the family iMac. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just trying to find my old college essays." I flipped through them. Email chains, budgets, even signed copies of consent forms. Forms with my forged signature allowing Dad to redirect and use trust funds to support urgent educational needs. Scarlett saw my hand tremble. They signed your name? Asked flat. She nodded. I compared the signature to one of your old birthday cards. It doesn't match. At all. My teeth clenched. I should have felt fury. But all I felt was confirmation. The cold, clinical kind that makes betrayal feel not like a heartbreak, but a diagnosis. I had never been paranoid. Never been dramatic. They really had stolen from me. Scarlett stood to leave, fumbling with her coat. I'm going to Grandma's this weekend. I already scheduled a meeting with Mr. Rollins. I'm transferring control of my trust to her. I'm also signing a sworn statement confirming I never consented to use your money. He paused in the doorway. I know this doesn't make up for anything. But if you ever feel like maybe I'm worth trying again with, I'll be here. Then she left. And I just sat there, a dozen pages of evidence spread around me like broken glass. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. Instead, I picked up my phone, opened my notes app, and typed 4 words. Take back the cabin. The Oakview Hill cabin was never about real estate. It was about memory. About the one place where I had felt truly wanted as a child. My grandfather, George Taylor, built it himself in 1965. Every beam, every hinge, every hand-cut board. When I was 9, he let me hammer in a floorboard in the living room. He made a plaque for it, M. Builder of Better Things. He died 3 years later, and the plaque was quietly removed during a renovation. Now I was going to reclaim it. Grandma had already confirmed it. My name was on the deed. My father had tried to petition for full ownership 2 years earlier, citing family maintenance, but my grandfather's original will had left a clause. This property shall pass to my eldest granddaughter, for her sole use and benefit, uncontested by any party unless said granddaughter waives it in writing. I had never signed anything. And I never would. Mr. Rollins drafted the formal paperwork for me to assert full rights and block any pending sale. Meanwhile, Grandma filed a legal hold on the cabin, citing intentional obfuscation of beneficiary rights. That meant the property couldn't be sold, transferred, or touched until a judge reviewed the trust's execution. My father tried to fight back, of course. Sent me another slew of texts. You're tearing this family apart. I did what I had to do. This is just greed, Marion. You're punishing your sister. But I didn't respond. Because every sentence sounded like one I'd already lived through. And I was no longer answering to history. 3 weeks later, the court ruled in my favor. $27,420.87. Repayment ordered for misused trust withdrawals, including interest. Additionally, the judge revoked my father's financial authority over any family-held assets and mandated he complete a 3-month financial ethics course before petitioning for any future oversight of anyone. He didn't show up to court. His lawyer came in his place. Scarlett did come. She sat behind me in a navy blazer, her fingers folded tightly. When the ruling was read, she closed her eyes and mouthed a single word. Finally! Outside the courthouse, the fall wind was sharp. It sliced through my coat like a blade. Scarlett turned to me. They're going to hate me now too. I shook my head. They'll blame you. But if they truly hate you for telling the truth, then their love was never real. She nodded slowly. And then she did something I never expected. She reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to me. Inside was $6,000 in 20s. I've been tutoring. Freelancing. I don't need this debt between us. I know you didn't ask for it, but I owe it. I didn't cry. But I did squeeze her hand. Not because of the money. But because, for the first time, she chose to stand with me instead of above me. A week later I moved into the cabin. It was quiet. The plumbing hissed like it didn't trust me. But it was mine. I painted the front door teal. Rehung the plaque Grandpa had made, which I found in a box behind the tool shed. I installed shelves for my sketchbooks and unpacked the old laptop Uncle Dean had returned, miraculously still intact, still loaded with my original thesis draft and design files. I planted lavender by the window. Felt like planting hope. And then one afternoon, as I was putting up curtains, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find Nyla standing there with 2 boxes. "Office supplies," she said, breathless. "Because you have an interview tomorrow. And you're going to get the job." I stared at her. "What interview?" She grinned. "The one I signed you up for. Creative assistant at Holden and Birch. My old internship supervisor loved your portfolio. I may have, sent it last week." I shook my head, laughing through a stunned breath. "Nyla, you've been so busy fighting. I figured it was time someone helped you build again." She stepped inside and looked around. "This place already feels like you." And it did. 'Cause I had made it that way. Piece by piece. By taking back what was mine, and refusing to apologize for it. The office at Holden and Birch was brighter than I expected. A modern open-space loft in downtown Macon, full of quirky lighting, steel desks, and too many plants. I stood in the lobby clutching my resume, trying not to let the nerves show on my face. The receptionist offered a warm smile. "Marion Taylor. Allison will see you now." Allison Brandt, the creative director, had a reputation. No small talk, no time for fluff. When I stepped into her office, she waved toward the chair without looking up from her iPad. Then she said the one sentence that made my heart stutter. "I read your design portfolio. Who taught you to render layers like that?" I blinked. "I taught myself. Mostly." She finally looked up. "That's what I thought. Self-taughts work differently. You troubleshoot faster. You adapt because you've had to." For the next 20 minutes, she grilled me. Not about software. Not about grades. But about failure. "What's something that broke you?" I hesitated. Allison leaned in. "Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. I've already seen your work." "That's not the question." So I answered her truthfully. I was made to believe that being useful was the only way to matter. And when I stopped being useful to the wrong people, I had to rebuild from nothing. She didn't blink. Didn't nod. She just tapped her screen and said, "Start Monday. We need people who don't crumble under bad leadership." And just like that, I had a job. My own job. Not one given with conditions or guilt. Not handed to me by family who would later use it as leverage. It was mine because I'd earned it. That night, I returned to the cabin and sat on the porch with a hot mug of tea, the smell of fresh paint still clinging to my sweatshirt. It was quiet. No TV hum, no creaking floors above me, no Scarlett asking to borrow something, just for the weekend. Just the sound of crickets and wind brushing through the trees. My phone buzzed. New message. From a number I hadn't saved. Elias. "Hey, sorry if this is weird. I work in visual design at Holden. Allison told me you're joining next week. Just wanted to say welcome. Also, brace yourself. The printer only works if you bribe it with snacks." Smiled. Then I replied, "Thanks. Good to know about the snack tax. Do you recommend peanut butter crackers or chocolate?" Elias. "Definitely chocolate. But you didn't hear that from me." We messaged for over an hour. Nothing deep. Just enough to make me laugh in a way that didn't feel heavy. Enough to remind me that connections didn't have to come with strings or silence or sacrifice. Monday arrived faster than I expected. My first day at Holden passed in a blur. Client meetings, onboarding sessions, screen sharing struggles, and a welcome basket with a sticky note that said, "Fight like hell. Create like fire." I got that job on my own merit. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an imposter. Midway through the week, Elias stopped by my desk holding a stack of campaign layouts. "Need feedback from someone who knows how to spot inconsistencies." I looked up. "You mean someone with mild control issues?" He grinned. "Exactly." We worked side by side for the next 2 hours. And by Friday, he left a homemade butter waffle wrapped in deli paper on my desk with a note. "Still better than the printer. But barely." Made me laugh out loud. Few days later, something unexpected happened. A man showed up at Holden's reception with a large tote bag and my name written on a sticky note. "Marion Taylor?" he asked. "That's me." He handed over the bag and gave me a soft, sheepish smile. "I'm Dean. I live next to your folks. Your dad sold me a laptop a few weeks ago for my daughter. But she just got one from her school." My stomach clenched. "I'm sorry," he said, offering the bag. "I didn't know until recently that it was yours to begin with. I think it should come home." Inside was my laptop, the one my father had sold without a word. I opened it that night, breath held in my throat. The password still worked. The files were untouched. My thesis was there. My draft business plan. The app mock-ups I had designed between closing bakery shifts and tutoring jobs. I sat on the cabin floor and sobbed for a full 5 minutes. Not because I was sad, but because I finally had everything I had built returned to me. Not just the device but the dignity. The proof that I hadn't imagined the hours I'd invested. The sacrifice. The work was real. The effort was real. And now it was mine again. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Dr. Clara Ortiz, a trauma counselor who specialized in emotional family abuse. She didn't ask me about my goals. She asked, "When was the last time you were acknowledged without conditions?" I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. She nodded like that told her everything. We talked about how being labeled strong often meant no one noticed when I was tired. She said, "You've learned how to carry but not how to rest. You've learned how to endure but not how to receive. You've been surviving on emotional crumbs." I left the session with a sticky note in my hand that said, "You don't have to prove your worth to belong. You are not a burden." I stuck it to my fridge, right next to my favorite quote from Grandpa. "Build something better, and don't apologize for burning down what was never safe." On a soft Sunday afternoon, Elias invited me to coffee. Not a date. Just 2 co-workers discussing typography and espresso blends. He took me to a tiny cafe where the barista wrote our names in calligraphy on the cups. The air smelled like oranges and cinnamon. We talked about family expectations, documentaries, and why he chose art over law even though his entire family pushed him toward legal work. He never asked about mine. Never asked what happened with my parents. But when I casually mentioned I once had to turn down a scholarship to stay home and babysit my sister, he leaned in and said quietly, "People think silence means you're easygoing. But sometimes it's just how you survive." I stared at him, and for the first time in years I felt seen. Not pitied. Not needed. Not tolerated. By the time my 22nd birthday arrived, I had stopped hoping my parents would call. And they didn't. But it didn't matter. Because that day I woke up in a place that was mine. With lavender on the balcony. A laptop full of dreams I hadn't let die. A best friend who never made me beg for love. And a quiet, kind man who left a note on my doormat that said, "You don't need to be anyone else to deserve joy. Just Marion is enough." And for the first time I believed it. There were no balloons. No banners. No family text. Just sunlight. Soft and gold. Pouring in through the linen curtains of the Oakview Hill cabin. It warmed the hardwood floor, filtered through the lavender on the windowsill, and stretched across the bed like a quiet blessing. My 22nd birthday had arrived. And I wasn't dreading it. I slipped on my robe, padded into the kitchen where the smell of waffles and roasted coffee greeted me, along with the quiet hum of voices and laughter. Molly stood by the stove, flipping waffles in her fuzzy socks while chatting with Elias, who was carefully arranging strawberries on a ceramic tray like it was a gallery installation. "Happy birthday, sleepyhead," Molly called out without turning around. "Don't even think about touching that cake until we light the candles." Elias raised a mug toward me. "You made it. That alone is worth celebrating." The living room table was covered with a cream cloth. A chocolate caramel cake sat at the center, surrounded by a vase of purple tulips, a mason jar of handwritten notes, and a small, silver-wrapped box with my name on it. There were only 8 people in the room. Grandma Margaret, Scarlett, Molly, Elias, Jesse from Holden's tech team, and a couple of Mallory's friends from grad school. No noise. No demands. Just peace. Scarlett sat near the balcony, sipping tea with Grandma, Her hair no longer bleached blonde, her nails short and natural. She looked like someone learning how to breathe without pretending anymore. She caught my gaze, stood, and walked toward me with a shy smile. "I have something for you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. I hesitated for a moment, then took it. Inside was $6,000 in crisp 20s. "I've been saving from tutoring and freelance copy work," she said. "I know you said I didn't owe you, but I didn't want this debt to live between us." Tears welled in my eyes, not from the money, but the gesture. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. I squeezed her hand. "Thank you." Molly clapped her hands. "Okay. Birthday toast time." Everyone gathered around the table, champagne and ginger ale in mismatched glasses. Grandma Margaret stood with the red wax-sealed envelope in her hand. "This," she said, "was written by your grandfather in 2009. He left it with our lawyer with a very specific instruction. Deliver it only when Marion proves, by action not words, that she knows her own worth." She passed me the envelope. Inside was the notarized deed to the Oakview Hill cabin, along with a property survey and a note written in my grandfather's sharp, slanted handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you didn't give up. This land is yours. Not because you had to fight for it, but because you knew when to stop fighting for people who didn't deserve your loyalty. May this be your beginning." My hands trembled. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my pocket. Scarlett handed me the knife to cut the cake, but before I could, Molly lifted her glass again. "To Marion, the one they once called the carrier, the fixer, the babysitter, the responsible one. Now the one redrawing the lines, claiming her space, and refusing to shrink." Everyone raised their glasses. Cheers filled the room, echoing louder than any birthday shout from years past. I took the knife, sliced through the cake, and passed pieces around. Elias sat beside me, elbow on the table, quietly sliding a plate toward me. "You okay?" he asked. Smiled. "Better than okay." He tilted his head, voice lower. "You know, I wish you could see yourself the way we all see you." "I'm learning," I whispered. Later that night, when everyone had gone home and the dishes had been rinsed, I stepped onto the balcony with my laptop resting on my knees. The folder labeled Thesis Final Draft was open. Completed. Edited. Ready to submit. Below it, a new folder. Proposal, T Designs. Inside were sketches, market studies, branding samples. I had finally begun building my own design studio, something I had dreamed of since I was 17, back when I used to doodle logo ideas in the margins of grocery receipts and save money in a tin can labeled, "Someday." Now it was becoming real. The phone buzzed in my pocket. New message. From my mom. "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed slowly. "I'm okay. But I need space to keep that peace intact." I didn't send more. Didn't explain. Didn't apologize. Because I owed her nothing but truth. 2 months after the court ruling, my parents completed their financial restitution as required. $27, $4.20 wired back into a new account in my name. They also finished their mandatory financial counseling program. But they never apologized. Not once. In a brief statement sent through the lawyer, my father said, "If she thinks money can replace affection, let the money do the talking." My mother mailed a Christmas card. The front said, "Home is where the heart is." Inside, "I miss you every day. Please forgive the things I didn't understand." When Grandma invited her to a family gathering, she declined, saying she felt treated like a criminal. I didn't answer either of them. Not out of spite, but because I had finally learned that silence can be protection, not punishment. One afternoon, as spring bloomed across the cabin's hilltop, I hosted a small gathering for the people who had become my real circle. We grilled on the porch, played cards, laughed like survivors. Scarlett brought homemade lemon squares and shared a lesson plan she'd written for her practicum at Glenwood Elementary. She no longer talked too much, no longer bragged, no longer wore her old armor. And somehow her eyes looked brighter, like someone finally discovering who they were now that the mask had cracked. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting amber shadows across the deck, Elias pulled out his camera. "Mind if I take a photo?" He nodded. He captured the group mid-laughter, the wind curling through our hair, tulips bending gently behind us. Later he handed me the printed photo in a black frame. "You used to carry everyone else," he said. "Now you're holding space for yourself." I looked down at the image. And I didn't see the fixer, the forgotten daughter, the ghost in the background of a family photo. I saw Marion, standing in her own light. It was early summer when the letter from the county assessor's office arrived. Official, sealed, marked, property owner, urgent. I sat on the porch steps of the Oakview Hill cabin, sun warm on my shoulders, and opened it slowly, heart steady. No fear. Just anticipation. Inside was the final confirmation. The title transfer had been recorded. The cabin legally and fully was now mine. No one could touch it. Not anymore. It felt like closing the last door on a room I'd spent my entire life trapped inside. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the property with a clipboard and tape measure. I'd hired a local contractor to start renovation estimates. The plan was clear. Rebuild the cabin's guest wing into a small creative studio space, off-grid capable, Wi-Fi ready, and surrounded by windows that faced the woods. Not for clients, for me. To write, to draw, to dream. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth. Meanwhile, at Halden and Birch, work was booming. I had just been assigned to lead my first solo campaign, a rebrand for a regional women-owned coffee chain. It was gritty and passionate, just like me. I poured my heart into every font, every shade of maroon, every headline draft. Allison stopped by my desk one day and tapped the edge of my monitor. "You do realize you're not supposed to have this much emotional clarity at 22, right?" I grinned. "Trauma is one hell of a teacher." She laughed. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." As she walked away, I glanced across the room at Elias. He was already looking at me. Not with pity. Not with admiration either. Just seeing me. Exactly as I was. One Sunday evening, Elias and I sat at the cabin's fire pit, a soft jazz playlist humming from his phone. The flames crackled low as fireflies lit the tree line in dots of gold. He stirred the coals with a stick, thoughtful. "Can I ask something?" He nodded. "Do you ever miss them? Your parents?" The fire popped. My fingers tightened around my cup. "Yes," I said finally. "But not the way people think." He looked at me. "I miss what I thought I had. I miss who I tried to be for them. I miss the version of family I created in my head to survive the one I was born into." He didn't speak. Just reached over and gently covered my hand with his. I went on. "But I don't miss the manipulation. Or the guilt. Or the way I was never allowed to be tired." He nodded. "I get that." And somehow I knew he did. By the end of summer, Scarlett called to say she'd accepted a permanent position at Glenwood Elementary as a classroom aide. Not glamorous, not flashy, but solid, earned. She invited me to her orientation lunch. I hesitated. "I don't expect you to come," she added quickly. "I just wanted you to know. 'Cause I wouldn't be here if you hadn't shown me how to stop pretending." Her voice cracked. "Also, I gave Dad back the car," she added with a weak laugh. "He said I was being dramatic. I told him I'd rather walk than ride in something built on someone else's silence." I didn't say yes, but I showed up anyway. And when I walked through the cafeteria doors and saw Scarlett standing at the buffet line in a simple navy dress, holding a clipboard and directing volunteers, I saw someone who had finally become her own person, not our parents' echo. She saw me, smiled, and whispered, "You came." Of course I did. We didn't hug, didn't cry, just stood there in the same space, both of us finally free. As fall approached, I found a rhythm. Wake up to lavender-scented breeze. Work from my creative nook. Build campaigns. Make waffles. Host porch dinners. Laugh with people who loved me without conditions. One day a message popped up from Mom. "Your dad and I are selling the house. We thought you should know. No apology. No invitation to talk. Just information. Transaction as always. I typed and retyped a response. Deleted every version. Then finally I sent. I wish you peace in whatever life you choose. I just won't be part of it anymore. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. Because I'd stopped waiting for a version of love that wasn't coming. The final piece of closure came on a breezy October afternoon. Package arrived. No return address. Inside, a photo of my childhood piano, the one I'd bought with my own money at 14, the one that had been repurposed for Scarlet School. It had been donated to a youth music center. A note was attached. We thought you'd want to know where it ended up. Signed Uncle Dean. I visited the center a week later. The piano was scratched but still working. A young girl sat at it, plunking out Twinkle Twinkle with stubby fingers. I watched through the window, then walked away, smiling. Because not everything stolen needs to be returned to find peace. Some things are better off being used to lift someone else. On the first snowy evening of winter, Elias and I stood on the porch wrapped in a shared blanket, watching flakes dust the trees. He looked down at me, eyes soft. Do you think they'll ever really see what they lost? Shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not. But I finally see what I've gained. He kissed the top of my head. And that's worth everything. Final thoughts. My name is Marion Taylor. I am not the product of what my family stole from me. I am the result of what I reclaimed. My trust. My home. My voice. For anyone out there still waiting for their family to validate their worth, let me say this. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and build your own fire. Because even the deepest wounds don't define you. What you do after the hurt, that's your legacy. And mine is just beginning. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Marion's story is more than a revenge tale. It's a reminder that sometimes we don't get justice from apologies or closure from the people who wronged us. Sometimes we get it by standing up, reclaiming our power, and choosing peace over silence. Would you have done what Marion did? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow Revenge Echoes for more powerful, true-to-life stories of resilience, redemption, and poetic justice.